Hello and very warm welcome to Decision 2019, a special program where Rise News brings you up-to-the-minute coverage of Nigeria's general elections with context and perspective on the most important ballot issues. I am Christian Ogodo, standing in for Charles Anyagolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, top-notch comments and analyses with unrivaled insight, hindsight, and foresight into Decision 2019, including the presidential election was seen as one marred with so many irregularities, and the main opposition PDP candidate Atiku Abubakar is bent on challenging the outcome of the election results in court. Well, so many opinions out there, but one that comes to mind is that of a renowned senior advocate of Nigeria and former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Agbakahi, who says Atiku going to court is merely a waste of time and resources. We'll assess its implications and impact on Nigeria's democracy moving forward. And having garnered 12 million votes at the polls and yet losing to the incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari, he feels his best bet is to go to court. That's the PDP presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar. No doubt, it is within his constitutional rights to challenge the presidential election at the tribunal. We wouldn't know what his allegations will be based on yet. However, many prominent figures such as the former military president of Nigeria, Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, and human rights lawyer and former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Agbakahi SAN, are calling on Atiku Abubakar to concede defeat for the greater good of Nigeria's democracy, not to go to court. But meanwhile, here's the chairman forum of presidential candidates, Mohammed Shitu, calling on Atiku Abubakar to accept the presidential results.
The presidential contest and the declaration of a winner, it is a time we begin the process of moving the country forward. Now is the time to do away with primordial sentiment, especially all ethnic, religious, and class sentiments. Nigerian is bigger than all. We have taking keen interest in the pronouncement of politicians and some elder statesmen on the outcomes of the election and acceptability or otherwise. It is our considered opinion and conviction that the interest of the nation will not be served by any party or individual resorting to litigation, either to overturn the verdict of INEC or challenging the conduct of the election. Although he may have his rights, with all sense of patriotism, we urge the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, to disregard the advice of those asking him to challenge the outcome of the election in court. To borrow the popular adage in Africa, two litigants cannot resolve their differences in court and return to the same house as brothers. President Buhari and Alhaji Atiku Abubakar are brothers.
Well, for a look at the bigger picture and the analysis behind the headlines, I'm now being joined by Chief Judge Agbakahi, who is on my far left, is the president of the African Democratic Alliance, and Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, who is not only a political or affairs analyst, but a lecturer in mass communications at Bayes University in Abuja. Gentlemen, very warm welcome to Decision 2019, and Nigerians are still, going to be making more decisions come next Saturday when we'll be having governorship elections and state houses of assembly elections. But we're more concerned here first, in this first half, about the plethora of what some political analysts have called a Babylonian tower of voices on, the outcome of the elections. Doctor, I'll start with you. I know you were, here during some of our analysis.
Yeah.
What do you think, looking at the post-election issues so far?
Yeah, very well, Christian. Thanks for having me on in the first instance, and good evening, viewers. It's very interesting to see that we are in a post-election period, and there's nothing outrageous about all the things we are seeing. In the post-election, in the post-presidential election like this one, there will be issues, there will be matters to be discussed, there will be those who are for and those who are against. So we are having it even in a rambunctious manner, and it just speaks to the fact that Nigerians are becoming much more politically enthusiastic, you know. The atmosphere is charged up, good for us, good for our democracy, and it just speaks to the fact that we're growing at the level of sophistication and ideation of processes, as it were. But with the specific reference to the point you raised, well, it's okay. The laws are there, the judiciary is there, the courts are there. They are not made for anything else but for humans, you know. The election has been won and lost. You know, somebody has been declared winner. And we have a runner-up who did very well in the contest, but who feels aggrieved, so to say, and wants to challenge the outcome in court. This is constitutional rights. So the question is he morally right? Legally is right, but is he morally right? That issue is also very contentious. I'm sure that's what you're asking us to look at. In my own opinion, really, there are too many ways to look at it. One, if it goes to court, it might end up strengthening the process, you know, validating the victory as declared by INEC, because if the court rules against him, of course, the winner will feel that, well, all the pieces in the jigsaw has been fulfilled, including court validation. And if it goes against, if it goes in favor of Atiku, then we'll know that there might be some other issues that we'll have to deal with. But I take cognizance of the fact that some elders have intervened, and their intervention is probably in the direction of not going to court. At the end of the day, the presidential aspirant of PDP will have the last say. But what is the issue now? You know, nothing outrageous has been done. No violence, you know, has been resorted to on the side of the PDP and the aspirant. So I think everything is working, you know, as expected. Everything is working legally as it should be. So there's nothing outrageous yet, really. So I don't know, what's the issue that we should be looking at, Christian?
Well, that's issue, I'm sure that's why you guys are here, you know, to answer that. I'll be throwing the questions. Yes. Let's turn to George Agbakahi, who is the president of the African Democratic Alliance. You've heard Dr. Adeniyi and the voices around about this court issue. Is it the morality or otherwise of faith, you know, that would form the facade of the PDP presidential candidates going to court?
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening, viewers. Well, actually, the 2019 presidential election has come and gone. Based on international standard, I would not give the election a high mark, probably give 50 to 60%.
That's generous.
Yes, but however, based on African standard, I think the percentage I will give the election is probably up to 70. This is because when you take into consideration elections that have gone on in Africa in the past 3, 4, 5 years, look at the one in Kenya, look at the one in Zimbabwe, look at the one in Sierra Leone that just happened, as well as the upcoming one in Morocco. If you take into consideration all these elections, I believe Nigerian presidential election is a pretty good election. And this has been adjudged by international observers as well as local observers. Actually, in presidential elections all over the world, it's usually hard for the loser to take the defeat. It's usually hard. Even in, you know, European and American.
Why is that so?
Yeah, that's where I'm coming to. Even in European and American democracies, where you know, the candidates focus attention, you know, the superstructure, quite unlike in our own, where our own candidates focus attention, you know, on the infrastructure. You found out that in the United States, when you know, Donald Trump won the election, the Democratic Party and their flag bearer, Hillary Clinton, cried foul that the election was rigged. It was rigged, that Russia, helped these people to rig the election through the internet, so that is the way it goes. Same thing in France. They always cry foul. So it's not unusual, for Atiku and the PDP to cry foul. But like I said, observers, I participated in observation. Other observers found the election at fairly okay. Not that it's perfect, but you also have to understand that in Nigerian context, you don't expect our elections, to be like that of overseas. Why? Because of our political culture. Quite all right, democracy can be defined as government of the people, by the people, for the people, blah, blah, blah. But we all know that practically speaking, it is not necessarily so. And in our own Nigerian context, I still believe that democracy depends on the nature of struggle that exists in our society. And that is what you see unfolding.
Struggle for leadership.
Yes, yeah. That is what you see unfolding. Because if you consider the amount of money candidates pour into elections and lose, it is painful. They want to fight to see that it is turned around. But most times it's not so. Look at it. Even President Buhari, who is the winner of this particular election, had gone to court on several occasions. In 2003, I think in 2007, and I don't know if he did go to court in 2011.
He did,
so that is the way it goes. So I wouldn't personally ask Atiku Abubakar not to go to court. Okay. But what I would say is he has to look at the previous, experiences in Nigeria going to court, okay, what the outcome will eventually become.
It's all right, George. Let me turn to Adeniyi again. You are asking what the substance of the PDP and its candidates will be presenting before the court. But I want you to take a retrospective look at the results announced, the reactions to the results, from north to south. What George has, submitted here looks like our elections is a do or die affair because of the struggle for leadership. Basically?
Yeah, well, it's a characterization we have severally discussed, we see politics here as we're already die-hearted about political contestations, which means that there's a lacuna in our ability to understand the philosophy behind political office seeking. Office seeking is primarily supposed to be service to the people. But if you look at it critically, if it's actually service to the people, the kind of dexterity, the kind of venom that they put into it, that they invest in it, will not be that vociferous. There will be some relaxation in their attitude towards it. There will be some decorum. But the fact that they are not that relaxed, that they are very concentrated, so to say, in terms of the arsenal, the kind of things they deploy into it, goes to tell us that there's something in it, that goes beyond meeting the eyes, and it's very unfortunate. It also speaks to the kind of political economy that we run. We run a political economy whereby you cannot make it, except the easiest way to making it is holding public office, because there are no checks in that system, because the system is so many loopholes. The average political officer takes advantage of those loopholes to put their hands in the till. As a result, we have people who are stupendously wealthy, and you cannot really account. If you dig deeper, you know that there's something there that is not salutary. So, it's the easiest way to make money in terms of, access to wealth in this country. And it's still a problem, not just in Nigeria, in any case, most African, most developing countries. But it will come to a stage where these things will become very impossible. And when it becomes impossible, you see political offices will become less attractive. We see how offices are changed in other developed countries, how people move, how succession goes on. And it's not too rigorous. People just see, well, if I get it, fine. If I don't get it, that's okay. And people resign very easily over there too, because they know that this is just service to the people after all, not service to the self. That is the situation. That it is what it is in our own situation. It is still like that. It's still going to be like that for some time. So people will still continue to be die-hearted. But that is not to say that we're not making progress, Christian. We're making progress at the level of understanding that, you know, there are other things to life other than holding political office. And that's what is affecting the credibility of our election. That's why our election is gradually growing in credibility because of national and international attention being paid to that aspect of it, credibility. Okay, 1999 election, it's a bit bad than the one that came after 2003 or so. Yeah. 2003 is a little less credible compared to 2007. 2007, of course, controversial. Yar'Adua set up a panel to review it. 2011 was a bit better. 2015, almost seamless because somebody showed example. You know, told us that, look, it is not just about any other thing. It's not about, this thing shouldn't be a do-or-die affair.
For power.
Congratulations. He congratulated the declared winner. And 2019, like he has said, is not too bad by many standards, even if there are so many imperfections. And that's why I've listened to people who have made a point. That's why it's also okay to encourage Atiku to go to court. You know, let's have the court come in and adjudicate in this business, and let's see at the end of the day what the result will be. If it is against Atiku, it will somehow validate the process, and if it is against him, of course it will invalidate the process. Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
But the important thing is this: however it goes, even the electoral umpire will learn from it. They will see some of those imperfections identified, and probably learn from it and improve against 2023.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
So, when you look at the calibers of, you know, the two men and others who have asked the PDP and its presidential candidate not to go to court. First is the former president of the Civil Liberties Organization, former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, a senior advocate of Nigeria, an expert in maritime law, saying it will be a waste of exercise. How, you know, much should Nigerians agree with that?
You know, like I had said earlier, based on Nigerian experience, you know, political experiences, I believe myself.
In 2011, it wasn't that bad when President Muhammadu Buhari, then as a contestant, went before the Supreme Court. It was 4-3 split decision that he had. In fact, the fourth person, late Nicky Toby, had said that he had to cast his own, you know, ballot on that decision to the fourth listening because of the, for national unity, the cost of organizing another general elections and the rest. And that judgment was even said shouldn't be quoted.
Well, you know, like I said, going to court, I believe, is a step in the right direction. But when we look at the previous experiences in our country's history,
so it should be discouraged.
You find out that we have to discourage Alhaji Abubakar.
So is an exercise in futility?
That is what it is. Because when he goes to court now, the president is still running the country. Before the case gets to Supreme Court, you're probably talking about 2 years.
It goes straight there.
You know, so
it won't take up to 2 years.
You say it won't take up to 2 years. Yeah, but I think for the interest of the country, it will create a lot of chaos. You know, going to court. You know, and you know,
for somebody seeking what he considers and the party considers a legitimate, you know, request to adjudicate in a matter, you know, you are doubting the outcome of a contestation, and you're saying I should just let it go. The typical, I think some people say, oh, the typical Nigerian way.
No. What I'm saying is this, you know, what you are hearing currently is probably PDP and Atiku's view on the case. But when you go to court, the APC and President Muhammadu Buhari will also bring their own case.
Absolutely.
Which ultimately the judge will decide.
The justices.
Yes, will decide. You know, so it's not an easy process. But I believe, you know, in the best interest of the country, you know, and for the president to, you know, use this first year, second year to improve the economy, the security of our country, and other major pivotal issues.
Those of you in the African Democratic Alliance are well pleased with the performance of Mr. President in the 3 cardinal points that his party and his government is pursuing so far. Am I right?
Yes, to be honest with you, one of the major cardinal points was corruption. I believe in that area, irrespective of the fact that, you know, people accuse it of being one-sided. I believe the president has done pretty well in that area. Also, in the area of fight, you know, terrorism, Boko Haram, I think you can also give the president a pass mark, probably 65% in that area.
Even with the killings every day from Zamfara to Yobe to, you know, Borno State. That's the epicenter of it. Only 48 hours ago, 29 people were killed in Zamfara. It's almost, you know, an everyday issue.
I believe those areas are the epicenter. But you also have to understand that 2011 to 2015, there were enormous killings in Maiduguri and the environs, to the extent that Boko Haram, as a matter of fact, had some local government to themselves. So when you consider and, you know, try to juxtapose, you know, you find out that the current president has done a lot better in the area. The only area you can tell me that much has not been done compared to, you know, fighting against corruption and you know, terrorism, yes, is perhaps the economy. And I wish the president would really focus all his attention on the economy so that we can be able to provide jobs for our children and our younger ones. You know, that's a particular area I would want him to focus attention to.
Abiodun, let's look at the former military president's call. He's talking from a very vast experience, you know. He's a man who ousted the some provisions of the Constitution so that his government can always have his way. He's a man, when he was in power, you know, the ABN, Association for Better Nigeria, truncated through the court process the victory of Abiola, or the continued announcement of the June 12, 1993 result. Does he have what lawyers want to call a local standard in coming into this?
Okay. Well, Christian, I think before then, really, in conflict resolution process, in adjudicating cases, right?
There's no conflict. The conflict here is not of violent type.
No. It doesn't have, conflict doesn't have to be violent.
Okay, good, great.
In conflict resolution processes, you know, there are procedures. The first thing, even the average lawyer will also attest to this. The resort to court is not the first line of action. Sometimes consultations can precede court action. It's only when consultation fails that you don't go to court. You know, going to court is like getting a third party to help you resolve matters. You know, because court has its own. Yes, it has its own strengths, but it has its own downsides. Because if you go to court, you know, there will be tension, there will be concerns, you know, there will be, you know, some level of acrimony, even if it is academic or intellectual. It will definitely come in because there will be fees to be paid, there will be time to be spent, and there will be all kinds of resources to be expended, okay, in court processes. So it's not always a first resort. And that's why the Peace Committee stepped in, my lords, Bishop Onayekon and Kuka, former head of state, His Eminence Sultan of Sokoto, and of course from outside, Babangida is also adding his voice. It's not to say that Atiku should allow himself to be cheated. You know, it's not to say that, it's not to make a fool out of him, but it's probably just to bring out the greater grace in him. You know, sometimes when you are offended, I'm not saying he has offended, he's been offended. Sometimes when you feel cheated, when you feel offended, you know, well, it's okay, the law of Moses, an eye for an eye, but there's a greater grace in letting go, you know, for a bigger interests somewhere, okay? But let's not forget the fact that I'm not going to say that going to court is an exercise in futility, like some people have said. You know, we exist in a constitutional democracy where there are laws, okay? We have made the point that there are so many things we can learn from going to court because facts will be tabled, you know, facts and counterfacts from one of the sides and all the sides. Okay, this place, the facts being tabled, we open our eyes to so many things that we probably didn't know, and there are ways in which it can enrich the processes, you know, and improve the performance of INEC, of all agencies responsible. But the argument we are also making is all this thing, is it going to be worth it at the end of the day, given the tension it will generate, and against the background of the need for government to focus on governance and take us out of the mood that we're presently in. So those are the issues, really.
Yeah, in 1999, the Obasanjo's first tenure, it had what, you know, seemingly looked like a government of national unity, where some members of the opposition parties from ANPP at that time, Shegun, if you recall, were covering the National Assembly together, were given ministerial positions and the rest, you know, because then the Accord, the AD alliance and the ANPP alliance that, you know, brought Olufalaye as its presidential candidate had, you know, broken down to cement this thing. Is that the kind of situation you'll be advocating in asking the PDP and the APC to join hand and form a government of national unity?
Certainly. I think I will personally urge President Buhari in this second tenure to try as much as possible to reach out, you know, to other political parties, not necessarily in, you know, in terms of, you know, giving them, you know, ministerial position or something like that. But there is a way you can reach out to them, you know, maybe in terms of policy issues, which is perhaps more important. And also, I've heard from my sources, you know, about the issue of incoming president of the Senate, this and that. A lot of people are advising the president and, you know, top APC steward not to allow what happened in 2015 that brought in Saraki to repeat itself, something like that, you know. So
I don't one does not see such a scenario playing out because APC has clear majority, more than, you know, they have 2/3 of the members, over 60 or thereabout, or 70 something. So,
that is true, but I think it's very important for the president to really reach out, you know, to other political parties.
So your concern here is for the president and his party to consolidate on, you know, the National Assembly and hold power there too. That does not help, you know, the aggrieved PDP and APC.
No, that's not what I'm. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, you know, that is the wish, you know, of many APC. But I'm just saying that the democratic process, you know, should be allowed to, you know, take place in the election of Senate President and Speaker of the House. But as much as possible, you know, I still urge Mr. President to reach out to other political parties, you know, to forge ahead. I know in Nigerian democracy, it's not easy to lose an election. It is painful, especially when you consider the enormous amount of money spent, you know, as well as, you know, supporters and all the rest. I think it's very, very good and in the interest of the country for him to reach out, you know, with an olive branch.
Okay, we'll continue this discussion, you know, in a moment, looking, I mean, at this segment, post elections and all the nuances of it, and the PDP's and its presidential candidates resolved that they will go to court and seek a redress. Then when we return, we'll look at the efforts of the National Peace Committee. How far, how well are they going to resolve all this? You're still watching Decision 2019. Plenty more still ahead, including as the nation prepares for next Saturday's state governorship and houses of assembly elections. A major crisis seems to be brewing as some candidates for the context, particularly from the southern part of the country, have vowed to stop the use of smart card reader during the polls. We'll get expert analysis when we return. Stay with us. Don't go away. Okay, you're welcome back to Decision 2019, where we'll provide context and perspective on the most important issues around Nigeria's general elections. I am Christian Ogodo. Thanks for staying with us. Okay, gentlemen, before we go to one other crucial issue, Doctor, I was going to ask you, let's look at the National Peace Committee. You had a brief mention of it, but how germane is their work for peace and national reconciliation, you know, between the PDP and its losing candidates in the presidential elections with the APC government?
All right, Christian, I think I've said this somewhere else before, you know, but permit me to repeat it again. I'm not particularly carried away by the involvement of any peace committee at all in our political process. This is not to say that, of course, I have absolute respect for my Lord Bishops, His Eminence Sultan of Sokoto, and the former head of state who are involved amongst others. But I think that their effort, their energy should have been made, we should have helped them to put their energy towards somewhere else rather than coming to ask us to be peaceful in a rightful political process and in an ideal political process. You see, the idea of a peace committee, you know, presupposes that there's warfare somewhere or there's violence brewing somewhere. You know, it is subliminal. It has that implication that there's crisis somewhere, and it's not supposed to be so. And it comes back to what we're saying, that if we understand political contestation as a call to service, as something, as an other-centered process, you know, then we wouldn't be die-hearted to the extent that we'll be tending towards violence, that will be bringing out our elders, our complete citizens, I mean, to be asking us, out of retirement, to be asking us and saying, gentlemen, please, let's take this thing easy. I don't think it's necessary. We don't see it. I'm not sure it's happening so well in the Western democracies that we try to ape and idolize. I can't remember somebody talking to, what's her name, Hillary Clinton, to go and to take it easy and not resort to violence. All the protests that happened on their own, and before you know it, they were all resolved. You know, well, I think we need to get to that stage and understand that no, there's a bigger interest above all other interests, which is the Nigerian interest.
Yeah,
really.
Is it because
you know,
we don't have the Nigerian elites, you know, just obsessed with power, and they don't, and that rubs on the followership below?
Oh yeah, it's not it's not a one-sided thing. You know, the elites, the political elites, have this perverted understanding of political power. Okay, and that's the point we need to continue to draw me. You know, political power is not supposed to be your power. You know, it's supposed to be a means to an end, not an end in itself. Okay, now everybody comes out and contests for elections, for offices. There are no tutorials, there are no kinds of even marginal education given to them. They're just loaded into office, railroaded into power.
They don't grow in the party hierarchy.
They do not understand. So they begin to see allowances and salaries paid into their account just like that. You know, so you expect some levels of misbehavior, and you expect this tendency on their part for them not to think of living that kind of opulent, you know, that kind of sleaze. You know, it can be very tempting for them to say they want to pull out of it. So if they continue to be die-hearted about this thing, it's a systemic thing. You may not want to blame them as individuals, but you blame the system, and the system should definitely check itself. You know, from this prebendal disposition, you know, which makes us think that without it we can never become. Okay, and because we think like that, we tend towards violence when we are losing it or when we are not getting it, and that's what is bringing all these irrefutable elders and accomplished citizens out.
Yeah, very parasitic, you know, on the leadership IQ of the people.
That's right.
And George, that's why the presidential and National Assembly elections very probably witnessed the kind of violence, particularly in southern parts of the country, where, you know, a lot of killings, more than 39 at the last counting, and you say the elections is free and fair. secondly, that is why there's the advocacy now in the southern part of the country that they too won't use smart card readers since it was not applicable in the north.
Well, in the first place, I believe the the peace committee led by the former military president was a step in the right direction. I think it played a prominent role in reducing tension.
The deaths would have been more than this.
It would have been more than this.
And is that good for a country that prides itself in the Committee of Nations?
You see why I said earlier on that our own democracy here depends on the nature of
Must it be
struggle.
different from what is universally practiced?
Why it is so is this. In the Western democracies, you see the literacy rate in that society is sometimes 80–85%. The one in our country, the literacy rate in Nigeria is perhaps less than 30%.
I don't want to put that into context with you here because educationists and cultural statisticians would dispute that with you. Excuse me, because if my grandmother or grandfather can speak and communicate in my language very well, you call that person an illiterate? An academic is here anyway. But let's go with the subject of politics.
Okay, so the issue of poverty, issue of illiteracy are factors that lead to
electoral violence.
Yes, they are factors. Unemployment. The youths, majority are unemployed. So they figure out that the election period is the only period they can come and make some money for themselves. And the politicians, because of what had been discussed here about elitism, is a struggle. So each group wants to get as many talks as possible to defeat the other. There is a particular place during this election, I guess in River State. At some point, it was a free-for-all between the talks of Amechi and that of the governor, to the extent that military people had to intervene. The same thing was applicable in Kogi State between Dino Melaya people and the Governor Bello's people. It was free-for-all.
Doctor, tell me, this kind of electoral violence, can it engender the kind of democracy we see in, developed countries where most of the Nigerian elite, political or those who are political, have been trained? Do they pass any message or messages to the grassroots, to the people he's talked about now?
Christian, I think violence of any kind really is a problem in any social system. And it is even more so in our own case, where we see our problems of economics. We are still trying to develop, we would need
basic infrastructure.
Yeah, we need investments and all that. And when there's a weave of violence at all, it doesn't work with capital. Capital, it takes flights, when they sense violence. Even the non-physical one, we can say some violence can be physical, some can be non-physical. Verbal attacks, assault, broadsides, psychic assault. These ones are non-physical, and it scares the investor. They take off immediately. And that's not the kind of thing we need in our system. And that's why it's always regrettable, when election, the build up to the election, we'll be seeing campaigns by non-governmental organizations asking us not to fight, election vote, don't fight, don't forget the beautiful music that was rendered by Two-Face and Company and Koban and the rest of them. I don't think that should be our focus. At this stage, we should be talking about encouraging more people to vote, more people to assess the manifestos of candidates, and more people to call them to order when they have failed. But now we're not doing all of that. What we're concerned about is campaigning against violence, which shouldn't be something that should be synonymous with our electoral process. But who are those causing this, like we have alluded to here? Of course, the politicians. One way or the other, they have their army of thugs that they hide, they keep as aides and all of that. You know, and these guys, without being spoken to, without even directing them, talking to them directly, they just watch the body language of their principals, of their masters, and move to action. You know, which comes again to what we're saying about, you know, the do or die attitude to political offices. It's very regrettable. But at the end of the day, you know, what it will lead us to again is our determination and our zeal, you know, to implement our laws, because there's no political offense that there are laws to deal with every political offense, you know. But what are we activating them? You know, maybe we should charge the security agencies to be much more determined in calling people to order through sanctions, through prosecution. You know, I mean, we should begin to show examples so that if you sanction this one, if you prosecute this person for a certain political offense, next time people will be much more cautious.
Okay, the incident in Lagos at Okota or so, the Lagos State Police Commander said they're going to prosecute the chap that was involved in ballot box snatching and orders. Then, let me ask you, the brewing tension now between the North and the South over card reader issue. This is quite dangerous for our democracy, don't you think so?
Okay, me, right?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I don't think, I'm not scared about such threats or such concerns, you know, coming in from our politicians. They make this kind of declarations, this kind of pronouncements. If you expect it in the build-up to any major election, like ahead of the presidential election, there was nothing they didn't say. It was like heaven was going to fall, but thank Providence, at the end of the day, it came out well, you know. And this one too, I'm very optimistic that it's going to come out well as well, even if we can predict some imperfections. But
this is...
But to say that there will be north-south thing, I'm not going to dichotomize, you know.
Yeah, because of the card reader issue.
Yeah, no, it's actually coming from suspicion, you know, suspicion that those in the north, you know, didn't use card reader in the last presidential election, and those in the south, who did that investigation? Who was able to verify that? Those are fallacies that no sensible person will want to work on. So it's just a mere political partisan statement.
If you call it fallacies, yeah, that's part of what the People's Democratic Party and its presidential candidate will be presenting in court.
But I don't think he's going to be talking about North-South. You know, I don't think he's going to be
in some parts of the country. Okay, yeah, let's not put the divide. Yeah. Okay,
that's going to be a very dangerous dichotomy that anybody should do.
All right.
I believe trying to bring in ethnicity into it, you know, is not a step in the right direction. Let's leave ethnicity, let's leave religion apart in our body politics, because we all know that these two factors can cause chaos in the country. Why I say this is, during the campaign, I've been to churches where some pastors were against President Buhari and APC. Conversely, in the north, or similarly in the north, I've also heard imams preaching against the PDP. You know, these are dicey issues that I don't want us to really dwell on, because these factors have disintegrated societies. Look at Afghanistan, you know, even African countries like Chad in the past. So let's not go into it. But I think card reader is pretty important in the determination of any election currently in Nigeria. Because we all know when there was no card readers, snatching of ballot boxes and other things was, you know, snatching of ballot boxes and result sheet and other things was pretty prevalent. So I think there is no way in the current political dispensation that INEC can do without card readers. So any person or any group that is going contrary to that is doing so at their own peril.
INEC admitted as much during the collation processes. Some of the issues raised was that the smart card readers failed in a couple of places, and the violence, you know, that erupted where boxes were either snatched or burnt and the rest It was aggregated to be about 2% and not substantially enough to have stopped a declaration of the winner of
The election.
the elections. But there is an issue, and how does INEC correct that even this Saturday during the governorship and state House of Assembly elections?
All right, Christian, there's no way that you can be 100% sure that technology will not fail you at any point in time. You know, the card reader is a technology, and it's novel, especially in a system like our own, where we still have problems of power, you know, problem of storage, you know, problem of even use, you know. How user-friendly is a card reader, irrespective of the training that we've been told some of those who ad hoc staff, you know, have been exposed to. And those things are just pronouncements. How speak and span, how clean, you know, how detailed do you think their understanding is? You know, there'll still be some teaching problems with technology, so we cannot really bank on it that at the end of the day it's going to work, it's going to be hitch-free. There's still going to be difficulties with the use. So I think for us to beat our chest and say we have perfected it, it's going to be really a long time. That's going to be in the future, not in the immediate circumstance. But that's not to say again that we should stop trying. It is good that we're still trying. It is good that we're using it, that we're still going to use it, because to some extent that's helped in minimizing rigging, in minimizing, you know, ghost voters, the incident of ghost voters,
seeing foreign
inflation
names
of inflation of those who vote who have voted or something, or things like that. You know, we'll continue to use it, and we should continue to perfect it, really. But to say that it's not going to, it's going to be
counterproductive,
you know, at the end of the day, is actually going to be a dangerous assumption to make.
But
Okay,
I also think in this respect, INEC need to make provision for sex card readers.
Backups.
Yes, backups, not in
Well,
such a way.
they often told us, yes, they have backups.
Yeah, but there are situations where they couldn't finish it up and they have to do it the next day, the next week. You know, they are supposed to be standby, you know, with the ad hoc staff. In case if one blows up or one is not working, they now have to replace. But the idea of waiting for people to work on it, you know, scientifically for it to start working, I don't buy that idea. They need to have technicians on the ground. If there is a problem, they can fix it real quick. That's what technology is all about, maintenance.
But why can't, because of, you know, technology not being 100% foolproof, just like human being, there are times you're 100%, there are times, you know, you drop. Why can't the smart card reader be used simultaneously with the analog voters register?
I think that's actually what they do, you know, because their processes really is a multi-stage process. I think they've explained it several times that if the card reader fails, you can move to the register. From there, you move to another. There are different ways of verification, including your PVC, with your PVC in hand. You know, so it's okay that we have these processes. If one fails, the other one will move on. And the essence of the card reader is just to minimize perversion of the process, rigging, fraud. You know, So it's good, really. You know, and don't forget, the point has been made that INEC's job is essentially a logistics one. You know, and I think it's high time they realize this and make very serious, even foolproof logistic preparation ahead of any elections. There's nothing wrong in sticking for expertise anywhere in the world. You know, and the last time we checked, that's an organization that is one of the best funded organizations in the country. For this election, they didn't complain about money. The chairman said as much. So if it is a question of money, they have it, you know, so they can get any expertise, the best expertise anywhere in the world. So it's just good for them to come to terms with the humongous task before them, which is the perfection of their logistic processes, you know. And it's just okay to keep harping it that they must get things right.
Yeah, in perfecting the, you know, logistic processes, so also is the issue of security. Another election is just a few days away. People have had very bitter experiences, particularly amongst the new 14 millions that are supposed to be voting for the first time. Isn't that going to really affect or create voter apathy? I mean, why go to the polling units and be shot at by security men who are supposed to protect your life?
I think security is key in an election all over the world. And it's so appalling that in our Nigerian situation, the issue of security still raises its ugly head. 1999 election, it was security, it was a problem. 2003, it was security. 7, 11, 15, and now. That's pretty sad. You know, I think the security apparatus, the security agencies need to do more work in enhancing security in the polling booths. Because for a situation, you know, for example, you see youth coppers, innocent youth coppers.
A deputy commissioner of police in Rivers State was manhandled by thugs and the rest.
That is very,
that's very disgraceful. If a whole deputy commissioner of police could be reduced to that level, then what happens to the ordinary voter?
The issue of security is an area that we have failed in our elections. So
INEC is the chief organizer. So INEC has failed in that.
INEC is not the chief security officer.
INEC is the chief organizer of the election. So INEC determines the level of security it wants. Doesn't it, Doctor?
Okay,
to some extent, though.
You see, my take on this is this. The election process is a multi-stakeholder process. We've been told this several times.
Very well.
There is INEC, there's the health sector, there's the security sector, and there's the executive sector, you know, all kinds of sector. Now we are concerned about security. Security will function well, really, you know, depending on the kind of society that they are operating in. Where we are operating in a violence-prone society, we are operating in a society with a perverted understanding of political contestation. And it's affecting, at the end of the day, our attitude, the ability of the security to function well. And that's why sometimes there's a controversial involvement of the military in the election process. Very controversial that is, because people say that the military is not supposed to be coming in.
Not the people, but the Supreme Court has ruled
very
on
well.
That. So
now, even the police,
they have no business.
Very controversial.
I agree.
I agree. You know, but the police that is supposed to come in, you know, there are issues around their performance too. Because let's not forget that these are also not people from the sky or from the moon. They are also Nigerians, and they have limitations. Okay, the ability of the police to withstand a charging crowd is dependent on the mood of the crowd and the venom of the crowd that is approaching it. You just made the example of the senior police officer that almost got lynched. Okay, he's not being lynched by people, by outsiders, but by Nigerians that he's supposed to protect and who is supposed to guide. So who are you going to blame in this process? I'm not going to isolate the police and blame them and say it's because the police is failing. I'm also going to blame the system that is making people so venomous to think that you should charge at the policeman who is supposed to protect you. You know, so it's a holistic thing, and it will take us again to the overall problem of leadership, because it's coming from the top, and we're not talking about political leadership, but also military leadership, police leadership, public service leadership, civil service leadership. It's the failure at the top that is permeating the entire system and getting to the ground and allowing people, voters, citizens, some of them anyway, to misbehave.
That means the security agencies are being politicized.
Well,
they are supposed to be apolitical.
Yes, they are. But I think in this particular case, I don't think we have to exonerate the political gladiators. We have laws. We have a system.
But they subvert
They subvert it for their own personal interests, for their own political aggrandizement. That is exactly why you're seeing military people coming close to where election is taking place.
Do they understand their role?
Well, but the way I look at it, they don't come close to the polling booth. They stay far apart. And why they stay far apart is in case of any eventuality, and which he rightly mentioned happened in Rivers State, where a DCP was almost mobbed by you know, by crowd. That is why we keep having voter apathy. Can you imagine in the last presidential election, National Assembly election, I think less than 30% of the registered voters voted. Less than 30%. Is it not ironical?
In the presidential elections, 35% of the entire voting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a shame.
It's a shame.
These are drawbacks for democratic development, Doctor.
Yeah,
but I believe we are evolving. I think at some point it will get better.
Very well. I agree
it
with
will
you.
definitely get better, you know.
No, but you start wondering when you say you are evolving, you are developing. With all the modernity, you're still living in the Stone Age?
No, we're not in the Stone Age, I'm afraid, Christian.
but see, in the presidential election, yes, I think one of the reasons that led to this voter apathy was an economic reason.
Okay.
You understand very well that the election was postponed. And truly, many voters from far and wide went back to their
so that affected
it.
Yeah.
Well, it's all
and
right.
People were also strained emotionally, you know, and don't forget that there were more voters in a section of the country as against the other, which speaks to the question of the lethargy on the part of the elite to participate in the electoral process. And we are also going to be asking that perhaps we should make the process less cumbersome, so that it can be much more attractive to the elite. Because if you have to go and queue, card reader, check from this one and that one, all those processes are too cumbersome.
Yeah.
we need to introduce technology at the end of the day so that it can become very simple and become more attractive. Then we can begin to solve the problem of voter
all
apathy.
right, gentlemen. I wish we had more time. We would have continued this conversation because it's really getting interesting each step we went. Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi is a senior lecturer at the Bayes University and a public affairs analyst, a regular here on the Rise News. Thanks for joining us.